everybody who's spent a lifetime building up an empire of whatever size doesn't want to pay any more tax than is necessary if they've done so to secure their family's fortune.
I know you yourself have been shocked when I've said the number of commercial clients I have who've not even made a will.
What will the position be in 5 years? Should it be bought in a different entity? Should you be setting up a different type of company?
What's the wider plan? What's the end goal here? And that often provokes them into thinking, actually, what is their end goal?
Hello, so today I'm going to be speaking to my wonderful colleague Roy Daby from our commercial department.
Hi, Melinda.
Roy and I have endless discussions about where business law ends and private client law begins. I take the view that every client, whether they're a business person, multimillionaire owning a huge commercial entity, needs to have different interests than any other person, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings with our personal needs. So today, we're really going to speak about the holistic needs of clients and where the interaction between us as lawyers works, how it works, and the considerations that need to be taken into account. Most of the time, it's about Roy having a client who wants to move at 100 miles an hour to do a deal,
Yes.
and about me and my team saying, pause, hold on a minute, how about this aspect? Is that fair, Roy?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah, no, exactly right.
So let's discuss the types of situations that we could be in. We have person A owning a small business and person A has run a very successful business. It's growing very rapidly, acquiring more and more premises perhaps. But person A has 4 or 5 adult children and really wanting to create an empire to move forward with.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, taking a step back, Melinda, my background is commercial law for some time. And normally what you look for in a firm you're working in is great commercial lawyers, if that's what you do. What's interesting about Giles Wilson when I came was how dedicated the private client team is and how it actually does complement the commercial department. What will often happen in a law firm is commercial lawyers are commercial lawyers. They don't often have a private client arm, or it simply is that, an extension, a little part of the firm. So what I have found and what I realise as a commercial lawyer is, as I've done the job more, is to have a broader approach for my clients and actually not just simply look at the specific deals and getting it done, as you quite rightly say, that's all they're initially interested in, but actually to push them into thinking about other key issues about them as an individual and as their life. So an example that you've just given about a family with kids is a perfect example. It fits normally the demographic of the type of client that I will deal with. Yeah.
And that client has said to us, when indeed we've convinced them what a good idea it is to sit down and discuss with us both, how are you going to do with this deal? What will the position be in 5 years? Should it be bought in a different entity? Should you be setting up a different type of company, a trust, something to benefit your children, but with safeguards in place?
Yeah.
Looking to the future as well as just dealing with the present.
That's exactly right. I think I would do as a commercial lawyer, or all commercial lawyers I know, their job is essentially getting instructions from the commercial client, getting that job done, getting the deal over the line, getting it completed, and that's it. Then you walk away from that client.
Yeah.
Whereas now what I am doing is asking them, what's the wider plan?
Yeah.
What's the end goal here? And that often provokes them into thinking, actually, what is their end goal? Yeah. And that's where private client comes in absolutely crucial. So that's where the services will cross lovely and perfect. Yeah.
And as we're talking about the older client with adult children, perhaps at this stage, moving on from that, you've got somebody who has spent maybe 20, 30 years working so hard, focused on providing for the family, if we use a traditional setup, finding themselves at a certain age where they never think they think they're invincible, basically. Yeah. Never thinking about the worst that could happen and the fallout from that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. Again, if we look at all of us as individuals, we don't necessarily start out at a certain age, be it in our 20s, in a company at the top or owning the business or with kids and with that stabled life. And as we develop and we become more successful and we start accumulating assets, be it private personal assets, be it company assets, whatever that may be, kids come along, married, etc., then suddenly we need to look at things differently. But the majority of the clients who I deal with, or anyone I know who deals with commercial clients, don't stop at that stage and think, what do I now do?
No, and I think it's quite unusual these days because lawyers and accountants become more narrow, don't they?
Yeah.
And often we've spoken to those types of clients that we're discussing and want to bring in the accountant to the conversation, which is always a good move.
Yes.
However, even the accountant that they're generally using will be someone who's very great at corporation tax, arranging fluid affairs, but not necessarily inheritance tax planning or other scenarios. And so therefore sometimes that does mean that more outside advisors have to be brought in, but the savings in the long run, financial savings, can be enormous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Too many commercial clients are focused on getting the deal done and being specific about what they want to pay for the deal, what the share price might be that they're paying. You know, for example, I had a case not long ago where we were arguing over 0.5p on the share price, just for the client to save X amount of money. Yet he had no plans in place for future corporate structure, be it inheritance tax planning or any planning whatsoever, which actually, when I sat with you, realised would have saved him significantly more money than even worrying about the 0.5 pence on the deal. But it never even occurred to him, an extremely successful businessman.
No, quite. And so inheritance tax obviously kicking in when people die, or when they're approaching older age and thinking, well, I will die one day. Everybody does. That's one thing that's certain, and taxes are the other certain thing. But everybody who's spent a lifetime building up an empire of whatever size doesn't want to pay any more tax than is necessary if they've done so to secure their family's fortune. But death is only one thing. Incapacity is another. And I know from the number of your clients that I've spoken to how few of them have made, for example, a lasting power of attorney, appointing someone to manage their business interests in the event of them losing mental capacity. Yeah,
well, I think, Melinda, even if we just go back to the basics, I know you yourself have been shocked when I've said the number of commercial clients who've not even made a will, let alone gone forward with all of the personal planning with regards to LPAs and you name it. But the number one thing they would all say is, if I asked them, why are you doing this? You know, what's the plan here? What's the goal? Well, I'm working really hard. I'm creating a successful business because I want to leave it for my kids. I want to make sure they have a better life than what I did and what my husband did or what a wife did. That's always the thinking and the planning. But it's just words often, as opposed to practical implementation, which is obviously where you come in.
Yeah, and if you say to people, but what if anything happens to you? You know, as I say, not just dying, but becoming...
Well, don't want to think about it.
It won't. It won't. I'm me. Haven't you seen what I've done, etc.? And they continue in that way. But that's our job as lawyers, is to advise them, to have the difficult conversations, to give the bad news, rather than having to support their family when that event happens and say, really sorry to tell you, but this is the worst situation that we could be in. Because there are always ways to sort things out, aren't there?
Yeah, well, I've learnt that from working directly with you and the private client team at Giles Wilson. As I say, from a commercial perspective as a lawyer, we have often just focused on the job, getting the deal done, and clients are delighted when that happens. They've never necessarily thought about the other elements to it. They just always think, just kick that down the line, that issue. As you said, I'm invincible, I don't need to think about that. And it's.
I love the idea as well of working in for family businesses and being introduced, encouraging the main client, if you like, to then introduce us to the family that have grown up and are coming into the business, which is so often the way, isn't it? That one or two family members will come in, and we encourage them, don't we, to come in and join in as soon as possible so that they learn and we learn about them, and as much transparency in the way they run their business as possible to support it and get new views.
Yeah, I think one of the most complex and perhaps one of the most worrying thing for a lot of clients who I will deal with, who are owners of businesses or high up in organisations, is a succession plan for their children coming through, or other team members, whatever it may well be, and other concerning things, whether their son or daughter marries someone, whether their son and daughter gets divorced, the kids, what happens then, what happens if that individual gets divorced and remarries. All of these types of potential real life scenarios are complications that have solutions. I think that's the key.
All the time, and you're fantastic, of course, as providing solutions, but it's only possible if we know the client's whole picture, and encouraging clients to break down that facade of just the commercial and corporate image that they have, and actually saying, but in my real life, this is what happens, and this is what I'm fearful of. That opens up all the doors to give a complete service to them.
Without question. No different to what we're doing right now, Melinda. We've always taken an approach at Giles Wilson that we need to know the individual, that we need to sit down with them, no different to what we're doing now, want to know more about them. If I think of some key clients or any clients, who are your kids? How old are they? What are they doing? Are they at private school? Are they going to university? What's their plans? Your husband, your wife, what's your complicated scenario? And they often initially are wondering, why do we want to know so much information? But it's exactly because of the reason you said, because we can provide a holistic and a complete range.
I mean, I remember one of the conversations we had with one of your clients, and we were chatting, and it was only because you and I were doing our thing where we're chatting like this, but hoping that the client will join in and open up, that a client revealed, great concerns about one of his children who was in their 20s and had quite severe mental health issues and potential, would be unable to manage money. And, just talking as a person to us. And then when we move that on to, well, how are we going to ensure that the interests of that child could be protected for you? His eyes popped open as if to say, well, can they be?
Yeah.
Well, of course, if we know about them, we'll put structures around it and give you the correct advice to support that situation for you.
Yeah.
And, we were really pleased to be able to provide that solution. And he was really pleased that finally something that had been nagging him. And I think that's the key, isn't it? A client shouldn't be worried about something that they can't share with us.
Yeah. Look, we all do it as people in our own personal lives, in whatever field or job we do. If something is slightly complex or a headache or an issue, if we don't need to deal with it in that moment, we don't. And commercial clients who I deal with on the transactions are no different to that.
No.
They come with one objective in my mind, which is to sell the business, buy the business, or deal with whatever the complications may well be of that matter. And they're not thinking actually longer term about what they're trying to achieve and what really matters to them. But as you've just quite rightly said, and you've displayed many times before, when we come up with solutions for them, they're quite surprised, and it completely puts their mind at ease. And they're so grateful for raising it and that we've asked them the questions about it.
So one thing that we often talk with each other about is business property relief, which is the 100% relief that's applied for inheritance tax if somebody dies passing down a business. And sometimes people will come and say, well, I've got this portfolio of properties, I let them out. No matter the fact it's in a company structure, it doesn't get business property relief because it's simply a property holding company. But actually, it's been amazing how once people are enticed by the idea of modifying their company so that there would be something to pass down with less inheritance tax, I've seen people start to run wedding businesses out of properties. So actually, it becomes a proper business. And I know that I say things to you such as, this client needs this. What's a memo and arts and things? That's all I need to say. And you take it from there, don't you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, obviously, each areas of law have their own language, essentially, and their own ways of dealing with things. But if you've got experts in their field who understand each individual area, then that's what we do, and that's what we're able to offer to the clients, aren't we? What's always often missing in law firms and previous firms I've worked at, or friends or colleagues or clients I speak to, of what they say is that they've never necessarily had the combination of the services. The left doesn't speak to the right doesn't speak to the left. So exactly, between us or between the department, we can often find a much wider solution to the client's problems.
And you have an interesting mix, I suppose, of the way that you approach the commercial side of work, which is, I mean, you're often dealing with several lawyers at one time, aren't you, in our team, because you've got the property and then the actual business side of it. Can you explain that a bit to me? Because I just chuck things at you and you come back with the solutions, but it'd be nice to understand more.
Exactly. I guess the word is, I've said it probably 10 times in this, whilst we've been speaking, the word commercial. But what does that actually mean? Commercial, obviously, is someone who has a business interest, whether it be owning a company or senior in a company. But those people are also individuals. So with regards to commercial work, it could be what we call company work, where companies are buying companies or selling companies or amending their company, mergers, acquisitions. And then you've then got the elements to that, which could be property. You may have a company who want to buy or acquire new premises, want to sell their premises, get a new lease. It doesn't have to be big. It could be multi-million, billion-pound companies, with international or national or local. Or it could just be the lady down the road who wants to open up a corner shop, or open up a coffee shop, or do whatever it may well be. Open a post office. I know some people still do. So it could just be something simple such as that. And what we will often, or what I will do, is often meet with the person, understand exactly what their needs are. We have a company team which deals with all of the company law aspects, which could be things such as what we call 2P, which is where you've got employees who get transferred from one company to the other. If you're, let's say, for example, buying a company, what exactly are you buying? What are the assets? What are the liabilities? I'm talking about, let's say, the lady buying the coffee shop. Is there a contract with a coffee company that she's taking over or he's taking over? Are they buying this company and suddenly on day one they've just got a whole pile of bills that they've got to pay for? So there's that. You've then obviously got the property element to it. So we've got a big commercial property team. So I will then obviously deal with them, and they will acquire or sell the premises or ensure that they've got adequate terms. It could well be, let's say it's a new person, again, let's use the coffee shop lady. She may say, I'm not too sure whether this business will be successful or not. Do I really want to commit to a 5-year, 10-year lease? And we may say to them, you may want a break clause. You may, after 2 years, want to have the right to be able to end the lease. So it's strategic advice as well. And that's where we're asking them about what their life is. He or she may say, we plan to have a family in 2 years' time, or we've got a small child. And we need security, so we need a 7-year lease, we need a 10-year lease. We want to put £100,000 into this business. Melinda, I could talk endlessly about how it...
But I think that's another point, you mentioning leases. And of course, we had a case recently where somebody had let a friend live in a residential part of a mixed-use premises with commercial underneath. And clients can be, sadly for us, a little bit embarrassed to tell us about something that they've allowed to happen and develop. But when they do say, this is what happened, I mean, we're in our element, aren't we? Because you just go in and you think, right, we've got to find a way to sort this out. And, so it's really important that clients feel open and able to talk about literally anything that could impact, because it only harbours problems down the line if they don't tell us about issues that have arisen. And
often clients don't necessarily think a certain issue is relevant. They often will pick and choose what they think is important. And again, like all of us, when we've got problems, we just focus on the drama elements to it or the emotional elements to it. Whereas our job as lawyers is to have the full set of facts, the full information, because there might be a tiny issue that they may not see as relevant, but we see as absolutely relevant. So as you quite rightly say, it's important that we get the full picture.
Another thing I'm coming across quite often is these days, many people quite rightly deal with probate cases themselves when a person in their family has died. But of course, if the person that's died had shares in a privately limited company or any other form of business, actually, the whole valuation piece of it is really important, and the setup, and who could or would either inherit or be in a position to run that company.
Yes.
Where you and I normally come to you, but it depends, doesn't it, on what documents have been set up as to where you find out the answer as to who's got the right to run that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this happens a lot more frequently than I think we'd ever hope it would. And I think the reality is that at the start, if we think of a journey of a company, people are just generally speaking very excited
Yes.
to have the company. They just see the positive. They don't want to think of the negatives.
No.
So they don't think about having shareholders agreements. In other words, a document which details what happens if this goes wrong or if this wants to happen. They don't think about those things. And I guess when the problem occurs, they then come to us for advice. And the first thing lawyers will always ask for is the evidence.
Yes.
What's the documents? What do the documents say about it? Because it should already be written down, which will be relevant and enforceable in law as to how this happens. And unfortunately, more often than not, they will say, oh, we don't have that.
No.
So then we then need to think of different solutions or different ways to try to...
Whereas had the planning ahead been
Yeah.
done, they could have perhaps provided for one or two individuals to be those responsible for continuing to run the business,
Yeah.
but actually the benefit of it to go to someone else, for example.
Yeah.
But it's all about planning
Yeah.
ahead for it.
Yeah, look, if we're completely frank, the reality is that a lot of people sometimes see legal services as expensive, and therefore they will only choose to have legal services that they think are absolutely essential.
Yeah.
So often when someone is starting a business, they may think that buying that product or decorating and getting that certain paint on the wall, which might cost more money, is more important, because they think at the time, I've only got a certain budget and I want to do that and I want to do this. And therefore they'll think that the legal documents or the legal services required or the future planning, I'll do it later.
Yeah.
It's not as relevant right
Yeah.
now.
But it's crucial at the outset, but also a bit like an MOT.
Yeah.
A legal MOT
Yeah.
is what those owning assets personally and in a business should have, in a way.
Yeah.
And that's actually much cheaper in the long run, isn't it? You
Yeah.
know, a quick check-in, let's go through what's changed, what could happen.
Yeah.
You know, have you had kids? Have you inherited some money?
Yeah.
Have you had a diagnosis for something? All the cheerful stuff.
Yeah.
Whilst the business is flying.
Yeah.
Just check in, get everything checked through.
Yeah.
Talk about it, make sure you've got... Look, we can still carry on talking, Roy, but I'm afraid my clock is ticking at me, telling me I've got to wrap this up. So we'll have to do
Yes.
it again.
Yes.
But thank you so much for coming in and
it's a pleasure.
talking all things company and commercial with me, the private client solicitor.
Thank you, Melinda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.